Welcome to Annotations to Art, Politics, and Life Itself. My name is Nico. My guest today is Erica Yu-Wen Huang. This episode looks at the pressing challenges facing politically engaged artists and curators in an era of eroding artistic freedoms. We explore how the global rise of illiberalism reshapes creative expression, resistance, and critical practice. And we dissect the evolving relationship between art, politics, and audience engagement, offering insights into navigating these turbulent waters. In this dialogue, we confront the big questions. How can critical voices persist and adapt? What role do curators play in supporting provocative art? And what strategies emerge as artists and institutions grapple with new forms of censorship and control? Joining me to explore these critical issues is Erica Yu-Wen Huang, an independent curator based in Taipei. With a master's in museum studies from University of Leicester in the UK, Erica brings valuable experience as former curator at Hong Kong's Centre for Heritage, Arts and Textile. Her curatorial research on hybrid cultures, migration and geopolitics uniquely positions her to dissect the complex interplay between art, politics and societal change. I can see that Erica has arrived, so do let me invite her in. Good morning, or should I say good afternoon? Good to see you.
Hi, Nico. Hello. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's now 4 p.m. in Taiwan. So, yeah, good afternoon.
Good to see you. Well, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Annotations. Erica, I already briefly introduced you, so let's kind of dig straight in because we've got loads of stuff that we want to get through, and I'm so glad to have you here today. I think what we're going to be talking about is really topical in so many ways around the world. Erica, you've been a curator in both Hong Kong and Taiwan. If you were to compare the two, where do you see the main differences in artistic freedom now compared to, say, 25 years ago? I mean, specifically, I think Hong Kong has gone through a major transformation, so I think that's the big elephant in the room here. So where do you see the real differences in artistic freedom, how that has evolved over that period of time?
Mm. Actually, to be honest, because like you raised the question like 25 years ago, because I was still like middle school student. Probably I didn't hear anything, haven't heard anything about art. But like I think like this question I can like answer into two direction because compared to now and 25 years ago, maybe you can like starting with like the how to say the urban development in the economic development in between Hong Kong and Taiwan because I still remember actually what brings me to Hong Kong to work as a curator, actually, I still remember when I was young. Actually, my father he runs a textile factory, and back then, like in I would say like in 1980s and 90s, actually textile is like very important industry among Asia, not just the Hong Kong, Taiwan, but also within East Asia, like such as like Japan or Korea. But also you can see actually my dad like he closed down his factory like doing like like late 90s and early 2000 because of the economy like all the industrial center moved shifted to like the Southeast Asia and also like mainland China like Shenzhen or Guangdong. So you can see there's a shift like between the economy and also industrialization between like these like different cities and also what within East Asia. So I think that's make a lot of the also affecting what the artistic practice within this area as well. So actually, I was so interesting. I mean, because like the textile industry kind of like there was like golden era, but soon like after like the shift, like the center of the industry moved to mainland China. I mean, it's also changed the society and also in that time actually I would say like you need to think about like the how to say the change of society. Actually, in Taiwan, we experienced like the martial law in like 80s, and so there was kind of we would say like a strong movement into 90s because like now was the first time Taiwanese people experienced what's freedom, and also before that, actually people they don't have like they didn't have like the freedom of speech and they could not gathering. So I think right before the like between the end before the end of martial law, there was a lot of the protests and people go on the street and they kind of seeking like we need the freedom of gathering and freedom of speech, and also we need the art is no longer served for the government or served for some kind of propaganda. The artists they want to express themselves, so it also like apply into like the different method or different practice such as performance, visual art, movie, and music. And there was I attended a symposium like 2 years ago. It was like it's held in the new Taipei City Museum. They're gonna open very soon. So they're talking about what's the importance, like this kind of the movement, like people seeking for freedom and also seeking the freedom of to express themselves, how it affect to the art practice. I think that's something very important. People should, I mean, when we really dive into the, how to say, the contemporary art history within Taiwan, that's something we need to take into consideration. And what was happened in Hong Kong, because when I was in Taiwan, I never been to Hong Kong until 2016. So in my own like stereotype or imagination, Hong Kong is always whether you get like a lot of because like for example in my generation we affected by the Hong Kong movie a lot when we grow up. It's also in 2000 we know all the like movie star and also TV show like hosts and also the pop singer. They all coming from Hong Kong, because that time we still have the impression even after 1997 the Hong Kong finished the like colonial periods from British, like returning to, I would say, like mainland China. So like we still have like kind of stereotype like Hong Kong is a place like you can find the culture like between East and West like merged together, and you see like hybrid culture and also all the like very trendy and pioneer thing happening in Hong Kong. So that's my impression. And also until in 2006, when I first visited in Hong Kong, I still have that feeling. And also you can see everything like very new and also very trendy and also new ideas and new forms of the like any kind of practice you can see in Hong Kong. So that's my impression. But of course, like in the past, like in the past past decades, when I was in Taiwan, I can always see like for example, like the art market is always centered in Hong Kong, because after like even after the colonial, I mean after the British governor, the people still have this kind of lifestyle. People go to museum, people buying art, people enjoy the like the culture, like all the kind of cultural entertainment. So of course, like all the how to say the market is centered in Hong Kong, but like people after the 1997, people can sense like, okay, like because the government say, okay, Hong Kong will keep the same for 50 years. So let's say, okay, like the last decade, like the art market is still very popular and also the rising of China. So you can see like that's also affect the Hong Kong market. It's kind of, I would say it's kind of the golden age of the art market as well. And it will also affect the, how to say, the contemporary art development in Hong Kong. So you can see so many different practice and a lot of like important artists participate, the Venice Biennial, get represented and get exposure in the international art scene. But also in the meanwhile, the first time I really kind of get a long time to stay in Hong Kong, it was in 2018 and 19. So actually at that time, like probably everybody heard about, actually in 2014 there was an umbrella movement. Actually that's really like kind of, I would say, kind of forcing the people in Hong Kong to realize, like even the government say, okay, the 50 years everything will stay the same, it's like one country two system, but you won't, I mean everything is different. So that's why like the beginning of the umbrella movement. And also at that time, I started to sense actually all my friends from Hong Kong who are artists or writers or any people like doing creation, they kind of find a way to sneak out from the censorship. And also at first they try to express themselves as what they used to do and used to say, but they found out actually the things getting a little bit difficult compared in before. And until I've been to like Hong Kong to work there for more than a year. And actually when I was there, I also was on the street to join the protest of anti-extradition law. And what I sense is like, as a Taiwanese people, I was super shocked because like in 2014 in Taiwan, we also experienced the sunflower movement. I think like even like Taiwan and Hong Kong, we are like quite straight, and our cultural background is so different because Taiwan also experienced the colonial period from like very early in 6th century, from the Spanish, Dutch, and then Japanese, and then KMT, the nationalists from China. I always teasing like the KMT, the nationalist government. I always say this kind of another way of colonialism period as well. So that's like, but also it depends on what kind of angle and what kind of point you look into, and how do you elaborate or how you illustrate about like how do you conceive the war and how you conceive the democracy and society. So like in 2018, like back to like what I just mentioned, in 2018 and 2019, I was also like, I work in Hong Kong as a curator, but I think that's something very affect me because in Hong Kong I can sense the, how to say, the power of the capitalism in Hong Kong. Running a museum, working in a museum, that's totally different compared to in Taiwan, because mainly the first museum in Taiwan was like Taipei Fire Museum. It was like established in 1983, and most of the museum in Taiwan was operated or run by government. That's some kind of very like regular things, and also like most of the artists get the money from the government fund to create their like either their practice or making exhibition. So that's something you kind of, I wouldn't say like it's kind of you have to obey the government, but it's also there's a limit or boundary what kind of work you can do and what kind of work you have to say. Okay, some people sometimes like when you get a funding from the government, you also to think about, okay, when you finish a project, you need to like get the money back and to kind of reimbursement of what you've done. You want to have to be really, I wouldn't say it's a censorship, but you should really to think about, okay, whether it will be the government will accept this kind of form of practice or the content or context. But I think I always say, I always feel I'm really lucky, even in Taiwan, like now, like Taiwan still, I would say like within the Chinese speaking country, we still only the only one keep a kind of certain space for the freedom of speech and freedom of creation. I think that's something I feel kind of precious, and also like that's something we really, as the Taiwanese people, we really want to keep that space, and also kind of make it bigger, to kind of make the community even bigger, to keep some kind, I would say this kind of shelter for everyone like within Chinese speaking culture. Like if they couldn't really express themselves, we really want to create kind of shelter to accept diversity of people, like they were not accepted by their original culture. I wouldn't say country because like sometimes the country is not like talking about the unite. There's only one like opinion or one kind of category within the same country. So what I experienced in Hong Kong, I mentioned like that's kind of power of the capitalism. So in Hong Kong, like I working for a private museum. That's what I really appreciate. I got a chance to work in the private museum. It's in Chad. So actually, like it's run by the private enterprise. So we have a lot of the budget, and also because the management management the level, they really like thinking, okay, what we're doing not just exhibition, but also do a lot of community art project. So I think they kind of they understand the value of what can art deliver and what can art do to the community. So that's something I really appreciate. But in the meanwhile, I also feel after the anti-extradition law, people really sense there's some kind of limit, and also there's a boundary. And I would say actually it's clear. So there's something you can say, something you cannot. And even you want to say something kind of sensitive, and you need to find another way to it's kind of creating some kind of metaphor whenever you making an exhibition or making a work. You need to find a way or find a kind of scenario to hide what you real intention. So for me, that's some kind of really, for me, it's really struggle. And also I found it's so difficult not to talk about anything related to politics, because we live in a society, everything is politics. So that's kind of trouble me. So, but also because of pandemic, so I decided to coming back because that's kind of life threatened. So I decided to come back to Taiwan. But also in the meanwhile, it's a bit sad, like staying in Taiwan And after to seeing actually the anti-traditional law, like, and the kind of this kind of social very important social movement to Hong Kong people is kind of interrupt because like the COVID is kind of set out as a how to say the how to say the kind of top rule you need to follow. So people cannot follow because you need to like safety first. But I think people's will and also people's like opinion about what is society, what is government, what is freedom, they really cannot to express during that time. So I would say actually there's like it's like all of a sudden everything has to stop. There's no space and there's no time to speak about what people really want to say about what kind of society they want and what is the real freedom to the people in Hong Kong. That's something I feel is really sad. So actually, during the pandemic, I really got some chance to do some show in Taiwan because even I was in Taiwan, but still my heart is still with my friend, all my artist friend, and also all my like artist friends like in Hong Kong. I still can feel that, and also like I kind of feel actually even we are Taiwanese that can we speak of the problem or situation in Hong Kong. There's always something can relate because like in Taiwan we still like we went through the martial law. There's a certain time we are not allowed to speak what we want, and also there's a lot of regulation. Also, kind of we call it white terror. So it's kind of there's like invisible. I think that's always like what is most horrible is like something invisible, then something visible. So because I wasn't grown up in that time, but I heard a lot from my parent generation and my grandparent generation. I know what they suffered. And at that time, during the 2020 and 2022, I think during the pandemic, I was seeking maybe there's some kind of possibility I can learn from my parent generation, like what they experienced, and maybe there's something to project into the situation in Hong Kong as well. So I think that's something I learned a lot from that. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. I mean, of course, both Taiwan and Hong Kong have a sort of a long colonial history,
Mm,
a sort of a long history of being being colonized from in
mm,
various ways. Now, of course, the big difference, of course, is that in 1997, the
mm,
UK turned Hong Kong over to China,
yeah.
and this is very different, say, from the 1970s when Kenya gained its freedom from the UK and became
Mm,
an independent country. So, say, a country like Kenya, for example, would have a very different relationship to its colonial past, say, from Hong Kong. Because, of course, in Hong Kong, if I'm, correct, people would also associate with that time before 97 a certain amount of freedom and democracy and all the rest. So, whereas with the current situations, they probably will associate more, kind of, the kind of the Chinese system for better or worse, whatever that entails. But it is not a kind of, it hasn't been a move towards freedom. It has been the move from a sort of one form of colonization to another. And that's quite, and so it's interesting. So for me, there's two aspects. There's this kind of aspect of freedom of, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of, and also rights, basic rights, political rights and all the rest. But then there's also things to do with identity.
mm,
What it means to be a Hong Kong artist.
mm,
Is this now somebody who's sort of, if you like, sort of shaped by kind of a Western tradition
mm,
through the kind of the many, many, many years of colonial rule? Or
mm,
is this a Chinese artist? And so there's a really interesting kind of, if you like, question here. What is it? Of course, it's
mm,
something very, I mean, it's neither Chinese
mm,
nor
mm,
UK, of course. It is a thing in itself.
mm,
But there's an interesting tension there, I think, in Hong Kong, which
mm.
which I would
Yeah,
like to understand better. It's
yeah.
much easier in a place like Kenya where you can say we're African. And
Mm,
it's very clear you're not British. There's a clear you're not
yeah,
white,
yeah.
you're black, you're on a different continent, and
Mm,
there's in that sense a clear separation from your former colonizer.
mm,
And
yeah,
in Hong Kong, that separation, of
yeah,
course, is there too, but it's
yeah.
been
Mm,
exchanged for something else, for a sort of a bondage under sort of Chinese
mm,
rule, and
yeah.
it's a different thing. And of course, Taiwan is very different in that way. Again, it's got a long history of colonization, but
Yeah.
its struggle is, of course, a very different one from the one sort of like, say, Hong Kong would experience at the moment. So
Yeah.
when you kind of look at the art scene in Hong Kong versus the art scene in Taiwan, what do you pick up here? I mean, artists in Hong Kong, are they trying to be Western? Are they trying to be East? Do they kind of now relate more to kind of a Chinese tradition in art history and art making, or are they kind of very consciously sticking to their kind of to their the kind of the Western canon of art?
I think you raise a very interesting question because identity is something I really focusing on because I think like what I mentioned, like I you mentioned actually the in Taiwan we have like really long period of colonial history being colonized. Actually, like I would say I always explain in this very simple way because when I was growing up, I was like there was like some kind of identity problem between me because like whenever my mother always told me like when she was like in the like primary school, they are not allowed like their main language used in Taiwan is like the Mandarin, the Chinese, and also we have because my grandparents they're from coming from southeast of China, so they speak like a language we call it Taiwanese, but it's really more like similar to Hokkien into like maybe you heard about like in Singapore. But also like nowadays we learn like English like in the when we are in high school. So actually, when my mom told me about when she was growing up, they are not allowed to speak Taiwanese as a dialect because the nationalists, the KMT ruling, they say, oh, it's not polite, and also they want to like kind of decolonize from Japanese, so they are not allowed to speak Japanese as well. But my mother like her like identity crisis because like the grandparents, they speak only Taiwanese as a dialect and also Japanese. So my mother's like identity crisis, they are not allowed to speak the language, like neither Taiwanese as dialect nor the Japanese as a formal official language at school. So who are they? I mean, that's a kind of really important, like when we talk about like something about like the crisis between like three generations, me, myself, like I couldn't really communicate with my grandparents with their own language like that, Taiwanese as a dialect, but I don't understand Japanese at all. So I think that's like three generation problem. So I think identity is something we always seeking who am I and what should I pose myself into the long history of Chinese. Yeah, because like I mean, ethically I'm Chinese, but that's something also like related to Hong Kong artists. Of course now, of course they get a. I mean like they will list like Hong Kong, China in their like national like whenever they travel, but I think now we are also saying actually there's like many. I wouldn't say like my opinion can represent the Hong Kong artists, but I think now there's like a saying like the Hong Kong artists they are talking who can identify they are Hong Kong artists. Like Hong Kong is a concept about like the place, the city itself, or Hong Kong is a memory or it's a history or the culture can be carried by individual creators to different place because of course probably everybody know actually because the after the protest and also the social movement, a lot of the Hong Kong people they move to other country. Of course, the first option is like they go to UK because they once they have the BNO passport, they can go to UK. Or there are a lot of artists they went to like they moved to like Canada. That's also one destination. There was also a lot of Taiwan, some artists like they moved to Taiwan as well because it's not so far away, and also not officially actually there's another kind of shelter program to kind of really host the Hong Kong artists, but they can seeking for different kind of passport and also like residential program as a kind of business visa to come to Taiwan. So I think that's something like nowadays we're talking about who can represent Hong Kong. Should they be really born in Hong Kong, raised in Hong Kong, or doing anything related to Hong Kong, or should Hong Kong can be a concept like people who were like really who are really concerning what the situation also practice in Hong Kong, they can be called also called artist, the Hong Kong artists. So I think that's something I found it very interesting and really look into how it gonna grow up. I mean, this kind of a phenomena gonna change in the following years, because like I have many artists, like for example, the artist I worked with in 2021. His name is Kai Chung Lee, and he mainly working with the Hong Kong archive. But actually now he moved to UK, like because he found like he originally he moved to Guangdong because a certain part of the research and also his like family coming from Guangdong as well, because like the family originally in Guangdong. I think his mother was in Guangdong, like I mean born in Guangdong, and but also like Guangdong is also close to, I mean the Hong Kong is still within the Guangdong, I mean really close, and also Guangdong region. And when you talk about the, I would say the first or second, third generation Hong Kong people, they are kind of they were seeking the kind of asylum and also seeking protect and also finding, I would say like finding gold in Hong Kong, seeking for job opportunity and also finding a safer place because the civil war. I think that's like first generation of the Hong Kong people. They have really like bounded and tied with the Chinese, with Guangdong region, and also of course it's Chinese. So I think like I wouldn't say it's like, I think the tension is very interesting. I think in a way like for me, like ethically, I feel I'm Chinese, but my grandparents they moved to Taiwan for a very long time. So I think like nationally, I will consider I'm Taiwanese. But I think in people in Hong Kong, they were kind of like there was like kind of conflict whether they should identify themselves. But I think in Hong Kong, for me at the moment, I think like in I would say like the most of the artists they were thinking they're Hong Kong artists. It's not about whether they were born in Hong Kong or raised in Hong Kong. It's more about like how much you can agree with Hong Kong. I think that's your own identity, how you identify yourself, agree with their value, the most precious value, because Hong Kong experienced several different periods about like the colonial period, and also they also experienced there was like the market boom into like early 2000, but also that's also because of the Chinese like contemporary are rising. That's also we get a privilege, we get a benefit from that. I think that's so like that's the same to the Taiwanese artists or Taiwanese art market as well, because you see like people never focusing on what's happening in the Chinese culture or what was happened within Asia apart from Japan, or now like people focusing on Korea. But I think that's something we get really benefit from that. People really focusing what was happened within Asia and putting their eye into like what kind of practice here and what's the power and what can they do and how they use their practice to shaping what is contemporary art within Asia. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, in a very simplistic sort of Western sort of like way of looking at it, and I'm aware of the simplification here, but you know, you could from that very simplistic point of view, you could say that Taiwan is a democracy. I mean, we're very in the West, we kind of keep emphasizing this. This is part of the reason why Biden came out with a very strong statement some time ago, 2 years, 2, 3 years ago, saying that he would defend Taiwan if it was ever attacked by China and so on and so forth. It's the defense of democracy is the argument here. Of course, semiconductors plays a big role, but that's separate. But yeah,
Yeah. We call
but
it like shell, like some kind of like semiconductor shell or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there is but democracy is the kind of the populist is the kind of the political justification for defending for the West defending Taiwan. Now, so in that kind of simplistic view of the world, Taiwan is democratic. Hong Kong used to be a democracy and it's been eroded and is kind of becoming ever less of a democracy. And of course, China isn't a democracy; it's an autocracy. So you've got this kind of democracy was democracy and isn't democracy. You've got a sort of a now. This is a very simplistic way, of course, of looking at it, and the conversation we've had so far already shows how multi-layered this is and how difficult it is to kind of apply these simplistic sort of templates. But just for the sake of this argument now, of course, culture plays, and you've already mentioned this. You've alluded to this. Culture plays a significant role in both shaping national identity, but also, if you like, defending political decisions and political identity of a country. So So you would imagine that the kind of the cultural identity, the official cultural identity of China would be quite different from the kind of official identity, cultural identity of a Taiwan. One probably would sort of celebrate more its sort of democracy and its kind of participatory notion. I don't know. I'm leaning out a little bit. I don't know. You have to come in on this and kind of tell me. But and of course, Hong Kong is in a kind of an interesting kind of in a very difficult situation where it's essentially pulled in one direction, but there's an undercurrent which would like to kind of slow this or reverse this. So in terms of artistic practice, how do artists engage with these official narratives, with these official cultural representations in Hong Kong versus China versus Taiwan? You know, from a sort of like bearing in mind the different kind of sort of, if you like, the Western notion of democracy, form of democracy, and no democracy, this kind of thing. How do you, what is your kind of take on this? What do you see any difference in the way, say Hong Kong artists or Taiwanese artists to approach this and the kind of culture they try to build or protect or create?
I think like okay, like let me think because I think like sometimes I also compare like whenever I see the art, I mean the artwork from Taiwanese artists and also from Hong Kong, the artists from Hong Kong, I always try to think what's the difference. Like what even sometimes they talking about very like similar topic, also trying to use the same methodology to talking about like to express their idea or concept or what how they conceive society. I still find, I mean, a little bit difference between these two places. For example, in Taiwan, I always like found like because I think we affected by, I mean, people who like most of the artists in Taiwan, they were like entering art, they study in art school and also get trained like from when they are really young and they study in like art university for undergraduate and master degree. If they don't really get a chance to, I mean, to study abroad or also like do some project in another country, because Taiwan is an island, so we kind of isolated like for like really really long time. I wouldn't say like politically, but also internationally. But I think like the Taiwanese art, because we are like such a small island, like people always like the Taiwanese artists whenever they doing work, they really focusing on like what's happening on this small island, even like socially or politically, and even sometimes the artwork is like politically or social engagement. But that's also like I wouldn't say sometimes I found the narrative is very thin, yeah, because they only okay considering what like all the like stakeholder or the party or the people in Taiwan and what they how people conceive and how people get to understand some certain kind of topic. Even sometimes I would say like sometimes some project they want to talk about like the like I would say like property development and also the local people they don't want to be moved to be have to move to other place and also like sometimes some work is related about the social change. But I think sometimes the work like only focusing on people and stakeholder, like the artists whenever they are really young and they just finished their like they just finished their training from school. Sometimes they couldn't find out a new way, like they stick into the form uh, other than I think they put more like they more focusing on the form rather than the context. I think that's some kind of problem I seen like for the past decade, some of the artists in Taiwan, and also they seeking more about identity rather to okay, how do you relate to how did you whenever you're talking about your own stories or your own opinion, how do you make your word to be understanding by other culture? I think that's some kind of the problem I saw in the past decade in Taiwan. But compared to Hong Kong artists, because they were like, I mean, even they like hand over to China. I mean, after like 1997, but you can still feel the influence from the British colonial period. The people, I mean, the Hong Kong artists, they are really understanding that I would say a little bit like I would say like the Western language, like not just about the methodology used, what kind of material, either it's like painting, sculpture, or video art. They know how to put themselves into the grand narrative, like international society. I think that's I think that's the strength of the Hong Kong artists. Yeah, I think that's also because in Hong Kong you always receive like, because we always say like back into the history, Hong Kong is a place you saw like the Eastern culture and also Western culture merge here. So you see the diversity and you saw the difference and how they find the dynamic and also kind of co-live together into this place. But compared to Taiwan, we are like more unified country, and most of the population is Taiwanese. But in recent years, we have more and more foreigners coming to Taiwan. We also have a huge like community and group of population coming from Southeast Asia. That's also changed the society in Taiwan. But I think within the artist practice, we're still fighting in Taiwan. We're still finding our way. How do we what is Taiwanese? What is the strengths of Taiwanese, and especially in the art practice? How can we use art to show our diversity about this like society, and also what can you envision the Taiwanese art scene? I think that's something we are facing nowadays. But I found like because the situation in Hong Kong is also changing, I would say it's sadly to say actually Hong Kong is losing a lot of the very talented like curators and also artists. But still, I feel there's a lot of the very good artists and curators still hanging in Hong Kong. So I think that's something we can still like focus and also keep an eye on, because that's what I mentioned in the beginning. I think art is something you can create some kind of shelter to accommodate different voice and different practice within this space. I think that's also some kind of the safe zone for everybody. Yeah, either
Yeah,
in Taiwan or Hong Kong.
it's interesting. I mean, when I think about my own practice, I think what I find is that the sources of of inspiration, where what I'm drawing on, what I have changed over the years, and I mean changed geographically. I mean, I used to be very much focused on in my own practice on sort of specifically European traditions in art, and in my case also in theater, and but of course, as you said, art doesn't exist in isolation. It's of course part of the societal whole, and there's politics, and not just cultural politics, but proper politics. And what I do see is that we have in the West, in Europe and North America, we've kind of reached a point where our Western ways of doing things seem to have led us into a dead end. By that I mean we haven't got answers to climate change. There's so many different aspects of there's so many crises that are bubbling up. Some of them have to do with what we've done in the past, the kind of the colonial heritage, the kind of the wars that are still unfolding, the conflicts that are still unfolding because of our past presence in those places. And what we've done to those places. Then there is the way we exploit the earth in terms of resources and raw materials and all the rest. And not to mention pollution, this, that, and the other. And of course, there are human rights, and we even in the West, we increasingly feel that they get in the way, and they're getting eroded away, and democracy is actually kind of getting eroded away. Look at what's happening in the U.S., with Donald Trump and all the rest, or what's happening in Europe, in France right now. Look at what's happening in the UK. Germany is really shifting to the far right really, really quickly. So what I find is that the kind of the Western perspective that for so long has sort of been like a sort of a compass. This was the way how to do it. This was how we do development. This is how we all get richer. This is how we all do better. That no longer works for me, and I don't see any solutions in that Western way. So in my own practice, what I find myself doing is look at other cultures, like how people do things in other parts of the world. So in terms of practice and inspiration, it's not so much just about, oh, I like kind of the aesthetics of an African artist, or it's not so much about that. It's because that aesthetic is sort of embedded in a culture and in a political system and in a way of life. So you can't divorce it from it. You can't just take that African mask and say, oh, isn't that nice? You can't just take that sort of Asian artifact or that kind of sort of whatever and say, oh, isn't that great? I'm going to do some of that, because that's very surface. And So you have to look at it the way it's embedded in a culture and in a political context. And so what I find is that when I think about the kind of the currents, the kind of cultural currents, for me it's really interesting to see how they flow for a long time. And this has been a colonial kind of enterprise. Those cultural currents have been flowing from Europe to the rest of the world. The flow was one directional from Europe to Africa, to Asia, to South Latin America, to the US, to North America. Europe was the center, and the direction of the flow was outwards from Europe. Now I kind of find that has, for me, that is no longer really a viable sort of model. And so when I talk to people like you, when I look at Hong Kong, when I look at Taiwan, what interests me there is how do current geopolitical developments and all the pressures that entails, how do they inform those flows, those currents? I mean, for example, in Hong Kong, of course, that flow for a long time was, and you said this, was from the West into Hong Kong. So Hong Kong artists are quite good at interpreting, working with that Western canon because they've been exposed, they've been showered by it for so long. But and of course, Taiwan would have different flows, different currents, and that would have informed practice in Taiwan. So what interests me is how, over time, in your own estimation, those flows, those directionalities are changing, or whether you do detect any changes. In other words, for example, do you detect any, is Hong Kong now beginning to become more informed by what's coming out of China or other parts of Southeast Asia? Is Taiwan still looking very much west, or is it, or whatever, or is it also looking in other directions? That kind of thing I'm really quite interested in.
Yeah, I think now there's a lot of change. I think like what you mentioned is very interesting because what I learned from school, like what I like since I started my career, like we kind of learning the westernized like the methodology and the form and also like the way of practice. But I think now I mean I wouldn't say I'm not sure whether it's a good like the example to raise, but I was in like Documenta last year. So Documenta was curated by Ranguba, the Indonesian collective. I think collective is something like I really focusing on these days because I found like now like before like everything like the part I would say the how to say the hierarchy of the art system is like everything like there's like big star of the curator, big star of the artist, and they control power. They know like what kind of exhibition they should participate and who should be involved into exhibition. But now like we in Asia we talk about I would say in Taiwan you also now we prefer I don't want to work by myself. I'm not a curator is not the one have the like full hand of the power. I want to work with other people. I want to know about what people's like idea because sometimes I work with the artist. Sometimes I work with another curator or sometimes I work with the art critic as well because I think now we are seeking for kind of decentralized like the society because like I think that's also something related to in the recent decade, like the social movement. People don't want to be the one like who control the power because that's really affect the society was like shit because like all the decisions were made by only or a small group of people. That's make the people like I mean that's not taking care of all the I mean the collective will. So I think that's like something related to the art practice. Now we are seeking we need to more how to liberate like the how this idea being formed and how this kind of the decision making system being formed as well. So we are seeking whether there's other solution or other possibility we can make it happen. So for example, when we are making art, we're always not just okay, the artist not just like being in the studio and working really hard to make it happen and work solely one curator to see a one like really blockbuster show. Now people tend into work with a group and also your strengths but you know something you are not good at with you have to like seeking out for like kind of raise a hand for seeking for help from the other people who has ability can help you to make your work or make your exhibition or make your idea even better. So you also credit them because that's like kind of group effort rather than just a solution or some kind of the effort only done by one people. So I think that's very important in nowadays, especially in Taiwan. Not like before, you always like seeking, okay, that's within the market. You always see big names, but actually now people, I mean, especially in the younger generation, like I would say the artists among like 20 to 45, they want to work within a group and work as a collective because they think like we're trying to seeking out there's new possibility to make the art scene and our society, our community better than before. Because before all the power is within a small group of people. So you find there's some like there's some artists they are like kind of they're like minority. I would say they're minority. They always like lack of the chance to get to show in the museum or get to make our or even get a funding for the government. I think that's something really different, and that's what I think in Hong Kong as well. Like even now, like the government really control the freedom of speech, but also the artists they seeking out new possibility to help the later generation. For the younger artists, they still can have some space to work to exhibit. For example, no, early this year, I went to Hong Kong for for during the March, the like the most high season in art scene. But also I found out actually now like for example, you see like M Plus and so Daikun and also Chad, the museum I work with, now they're like really like get a lot of focus attention into like from the society or from the art from the art world, but still like there's always something cannot be shown into this kind of big institution. So I feel like now because like couple years ago there are some like small artists run space in Hong Kong, but they all kind of disappear or no longer can sustain, so they kind of closed down. But in March, I went to Hong Kong, and also an artist friend of mine, his name is South Ho. Like actually, like very, I think like 10 years ago, he started a artist run space as well. It's called 100 feet yard like space. It because it's so small, you know, like Hong Kong, like everything is so expensive. Even the property is so tiny, but really costly. But he still like run a space. He really want the kind of this kind of artist space run space can kind of giving some right for the artists who are not able to show in this kind of institution. They can be more flexible. They have more flexibility and also can encounter more different idea to be in this place. But it was like the 100 feet part was finished. So now he runs a new space. It's called New Part because that's the old one is called 100 feet part. Then this the new one he founded with other curators, art critics, and artists. They run together. This called New Part. So that's also a small, tiny space, but always they found they invite one artist to do a solo show. So it's within the building. The government run. It's called it's a space run by Jackie Club. This also the place also the building also accommodate a lot of different artist studio from like painting, sculpture to media to performance. There are many different things and also designer studio within that. So like the new part is a place people can really go there and also like kind of gathering and also you always meet like artist friend over there and meet people who still interested in art and also caring about like the freedom of speech in art practice. And also you always see something very new compared to something already ready in the institution, like and also be censored by government, I would say. Yeah, I think that's like always in the society, that's always very precious to see this kind of space can still exist and also standing there and waiting people to be there. Yeah.
When as a curator, when you work with with artists in this current environment, you're quite aware, and you've mentioned this a number of times now, that there are red lines. That they're not always very obvious, but there are things that you really, you're not welcome to say the least. Yeah. And how do you, and of course, artists are aware of that as well. And I think, certainly in my world, one thing artists always try to do is push the boundaries a little, to test the water. And so what, I mean, in doing this work, of course, there is this whole thing about self-censorship that we kind of, before we even try, we accept the boundaries and we work within those, and it's a safe space and it's comfortable. But of course, you don't come across like somebody who would be happy with that. I get a sense that you are somebody who likes to push boundaries a little bit as well. So, what are the kind of the challenges you encounter when you are working with sort of politically engaged or politically minded artists, and how do you negotiate that boundary of of what you can and cannot say, or how do you deal with that?
I think like I have to say it very carefully. Actually, I would say actually in Taiwan, we are a free country. Like what I state in the very beginning, we are a free country. We can do whatever we want. Like unless you don't harm other people. I mean, physically really harms anyone. So you can really express anything. Even like whenever I see some artwork and artists, we are in different political, I mean, opinion, but I respect him or I respect her, like works. But I think like the situation in Hong Kong was really dangerous. I wish this word. Then sometimes I think that's also my self censorship as well. I always want to push the boundary through the expression and also creating some kind of space can people can really express their opinion, even I agree or disagree with them. I want to create this kind of safe zone. Everybody can have their freedom and right to speak what their own like their own opinion and their own thoughts. I think that's something I want to create. Especially that's within the expression context. That's some kind of space and the boundary I want to push a little bit. But whenever I work with the artists from Hong Kong, it's just their words a little bit political engagement. Because for example, the artist Sao Sao, I just curate his solo show in Taiwan, but it was in Taiwan, so it's totally fine. But actually, when he first showed in my group show in 2021, at that time I was a little bit hesitate because he was still in Hong Kong, and also he even pushed a little bit further within their practice. He made a special installation in the toilets in the museum, but that's something really real, and kind of he recreates the scenario what was happening during the protest. But I think that's something like nowadays you cannot really see in Hong Kong. The only way we choose like we don't do any public uh, like advertising. Like we don't put any photo on the social media or any kind of you can search internet. But instead we do like very little amount of print in the publication. So people who really care and people really want to keep the moment of the work they can do. And also we also organize some of the for example, I organize some of the talks and also like the workshop with artists like their works a little bit politically sensitive like in that situation. So we do the talk online, but nobody can take sound record or video record, and everybody signed agreement they wouldn't disclose. So I think it's kind of like I think I had to be really careful because I want to this kind of opinion and also creation can be shown to people who really care about the topic, the subject we want to talk about. Because the exhibition is called the world is yet to come. Because that time we want to discuss actually because of pandemic, the government also I also once using the example the creation itself to talking about the government control in Taiwan because everything you need to really give some kind of your own human right to the government when you put the safety as a priority. But I think that's some kind of sacrifice for every individual as well. Is that right? Because I think some people don't want to give that right to the government because like who can say like the safety is the first if the society we don't have the freedom of speech. I don't think like the when you put a safety at first and you kind of losing your right to speech. I think that's not okay for me. I wouldn't accept this kind of society. I wouldn't say it's my ideal future. Yeah, so I
It,
think
it's
this I want to like
it's interesting. I mean, like there's one thing which I just like to kind of, I thought that was a really, and I just don't want this to get lost in the conversation. Did I understand this correctly that there are situations where, say, an artist does something that is politically highly sensitive in Hong Kong, or like a Hong Kong artist in relation to Hong Kong, maybe even outside of Hong Kong, but still politically very sensitive in relation to Hong Kong, that you would that you would possibly kind of stage the work, do the work, but you wouldn't include it in the publicity so that people who really want to see it and want to engage with it, they have to come to the venue, and then they get the unfiltered, the real thing. But from afar, like through social media, through catalog, you wouldn't actually know because it's not in there. Is that did I understand this correctly?
I think like because like the show was happening in 2021, so
Yeah. No, I
actually
think it's
there no
interesting. I'm
people.
not. I'm not. I'm not
Yeah,
at all being
yeah,
critical. I thought that's a really, really interesting idea that you
yeah,
that you would have different levels of access. You'd have
yeah.
local access, which would not necessarily show the same, or probably show
Mm,
more than a sort of a
mm.
remote access. And I thought that way of filtering can probably be quite a good sort of like way of protecting the artists, right? So I'm not.
Yeah, I think that's a, I would say that's a strategy we took because I think I want to show the work, but I also want to protect artists. I will give you a very interesting sample. What I heard from the artist I used to work with, and he said actually his work is very sensitive. So yeah, so when his work is showing in one of the museums in Shanghai, so ever whenever he give the statement, and he will give the one version one, and then the curator will edit it into version two and send it to the authority to get the approved to show the work. But in the end, they will show version three to, I mean, show the work. It depends on what kind of angle you really like illustrate, and also yeah, because you always like the artist practice itself, like people can like they can conceive the work, they can feel the work by themselves. But always like this kind of paperwork, you always find a way to sneak out, and also that's nothing like his work is like just a landscape or just like kind of documentation. But when people understand the context, people feel it. But when getting to authority paper, you need to find a way to sneak out to protect the artist. I think that's a strategy we try to make because I think you always like when the situation is bad, but you still want to keep some kind of safe space for the artist, for the curator, for the audience as well.
Absolutely. Now, a sort of a question that to me is very closely related to that has to do with, if you like, the preciousness of the work or the kind of the significance of the work, and the also the kind of the weight of the work. I mean, I find, and I think most people find that in a kind of in a culture where everything goes, where you can say everything, where everything can be done, it sort of kind of in a way also erodes the power of the art. I mean, if like when you think about, I'm not a Christian at all, but when you think about Reformation and the kind of like Lutheran, like when he first translated the Bible into local languages, Jesus, that was a huge kind of thing. Yeah. Now words mean nothing, like social media. So there is
Mm,
something interesting about the relationship between sort of social norms, if you like, and political norms on the one
mm,
hand, and the way we engage with those norms. And when there is a sort of, there can be a healthy tension, because in my view, actually, not everything should be in a museum. I do think there's a difference
mm,
between pornography and all the rest. And I would personally draw lines. I'm not saying that work that I consider, say, pornographic shouldn't be in a gallery. I'm not saying that,
yeah.
but I'm just
Mm,
saying it's good personally for me to kind of to have those, also this sort of, if you like, moral, ethical, whatever sort of like frameworks to look at the work, because I think in a world where everything goes, it also opens the door to misogynists, and like it doesn't only produce interesting, good, critical, edgy work. It also produces the worst of mankind. So it has both.
mm,
It goes in both directions. So I think there is a kind of a healthy balance to be struck from a curatorial point of view as well. How do you position and how do you angle it? And when you do this kind of work that is politically uh, difficult, do you find that it in itself kind of enhances the power of the work? In other words, that it gives the work a power, a force that it wouldn't have otherwise?
mm. I think like I will give an example. Sometimes when I deal with this kind of issue, but because I always want to make solution, is to make people to think about like probably they already get used to their current situation, mostly socially or politically. And I think because I'm personally, I really like science fiction. So science fiction is always something I can really use as a metaphor to make people can projecting. Okay, let's like make it like more like in imaginary. You kind of leave all the like stereotype and also what was current situation. You can leave it behind so people can imagine. So imagination, it's like it's a right for everybody. So I think I really like use like science fiction as a metaphor to starting a narrative or like as used as a kind of hook when I start kind of curatorial practice. I think that's something people can always relate because I think science fiction, what is the best science fiction is it's merged with the reality and like the imagination. I think the best science fiction is in this type. Yeah, so I always like really seeking like this kind of the how to say a solution to help me to kind of narrow down to shaping my own curatorial practice. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when like going back to this idea that you would have, that there would be different versions of a work. It would still be the same work, but it would be somewhat, like the kind of the controversial edges would be smoothed out, or certain aspects would be let out, or it may not be visible at all from afar. You'd have to go there to actually see it. Do you find that also kind of makes it more important than to actually go and see the work? In other words, that because of course, with this sort of flood of kind of media that we have, and we, like we can, I mean, exhibitions, we can kind of have virtual tours, we can have all kinds, we can look at the work photographically, it tends to be video. Going to an exhibition to see the work isn't necessarily necessary anymore. But of course, when you are having different versions, then it becomes absolutely necessary again, because the exhibition is no longer the same as what you get on online. Is that a sort of a strategy you think that makes sense beyond the political? That you sort of would, have filters in that way?
Mm, I think yeah, of course, when you're talking about like expression, like always like physical, I mean like because like now like we also passing like the crazy 3 years pandemic. I think people still like kind of a little bit traumatized everything. And for me myself, like I'm a little bit traumatized with online because I was lecturing. So online sometimes make me feel like hesitated, should we do? But also appreciate about online because online there's new, I would say it's a new world you can explore and also different media and also even like we are talking like online face to face. I found there's a lot of different things like I can look into people's facial expression clearly, and also there's a lot of things like you kind of really focusing on your hearing and also like voice, and also you wouldn't distract by other things. But I think like making exhibition, that's some kind of different story because whenever you making exhibition, always really, I insist to make physical exhibition. It's always because not just because you as a person to see in the exhibition, but also like how did you integrate with the people where you were with in the same room or same space and also the same scenario. I think like that's the most precious thing I feel whenever I'm making exhibition. But also like sometimes when we do the exhibition in the curatorial practice, I always seeking whether there's other way to make exhibition, because whenever you curate a show, it always about okay putting our work in a space and also inviting people to come, and also maybe the hour itself it will start having dialogue and also responding to each other. But I think always very important, there's something like not within the exhibition context, there's something always how artists coming up this thought to create this work, and also maybe there's something they're not talking about in the show but also affected in the process when they do the work. So I always sometimes I will create like recent, I would say in the past 3 years, whenever I curate a show, I always make a reading list. But the reading list is not say okay you have to read it before you enter the show, but it's more like if you are interested into like what affect the artist, what affect like how this curatorial practice starting with. I always giving a reading list for the audience if they are interested. They can get a little bit sense about, okay, when the artists, when they creating this work, what kind of book they are reading, what kind of video what kind of movie they recently watched during their practice. I think that's something can make people put into the scenario when what kind of topic, what kind of subject artists caring about, and what help them to make this work. I think that's make the, how to say, the gap and also the distance between the viewer and also artists and also the concept of the show getting like closer. I think that's kind of I like it. I like it a lot to creating different paths to get an approach to maybe it's a reality or getting to that space, then people can really have the can really have kind of mutual concern, and also maybe there's some kind of dialogue can starting with. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there isn't such a thing as a public, isn't there? There's many different publics, and so in a way, you want to kind of tailor access for those publics quite individually. What interests me here now is do you discern any fundamental or significant difference, say, between a kind of a Taiwanese audience and a Hong Kong audience, when in terms of exhibitions within the kind of the two different kinds of political settings as well, in terms of expectations, in terms of how they would respond to political work and all the rest?
I think I wouldn't identify this way, but there's something I found like I mean, in the couple years like from now, actually, I found actually in like in Hong Kong, like the artists they kind of lack of space. So actually, for the artists in Hong Kong making a sculpture, especially when the artists say they are making sculpture, for them it's a precious because they don't have enough space to storage their artwork, but also they don't have, if they're working with ceramic, they wouldn't have like certain space to make the clean, so for to make the pottery work. But in Taiwan, like we have a lot of space compared to Hong Kong. We have a lot of space. So I found that the Hong Kong artists they really appreciate this kind of more like material, especially like textile or ceramic, and also some kind of creation. You can really appreciate the texture and also material itself because for them it's very precious, and also they really appreciate, I mean, the big, I mean, especially what I mentioned like the pottery. But in Taiwan, because we have, compared to Hong Kong, we have more space, so we are more focusing on like we appreciate more, the context itself, it can elaborate and also projecting to, I mean, the grand narrative. And also you can find, of course, sometimes our, it may be talking about some kind of the story or narrative is nothing related to Taiwan, but in our culture we can find ourselves there's some mutual concept or mutual concern we can really projecting, okay, we can really resonate to the context itself. I think that's some kind of different I found in two types of audience.
Excellent. That's very, very interesting. Listen, we're running out of time, but it was really, really interesting talking to you. Thank you very much. I hope we can continue this dialogue at some point in the future and stay in touch anyway. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds really amazing what you do.
sure.
Before we wrap up, are there any exhibitions, events, publications that you would like to recommend for our listeners and viewers?
Actually, I'm curating. I'm now having a show at the moment. It's like the show I curate for South Hall. Yeah, the photographer from Hong Kong. So if you are in Taiwan, welcome to visit. It's in Avocado Lab. So you can also check on their like on their website. It's like how it's more like kind of 10-year retrospective show of the photographer South Hall, but he always put his lens into Hong Kong, but he used a very like abstract way to talking about the I would say the social and also the political movement in Hong Kong. That's something really precious, and also I really hope everyone can see it online. And also in the upcoming in next week, I'm gonna have another show in Hongga Museum. It's working with other like artists from Taiwan. His name is Gu Guangyi. So if you're interested, please go check out Hongga Museum's website. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, this was really nice talking to you, and I wish you
Yeah.
all loads of success with this exhibition. It sounds really, really interesting. And are you planning any trips to Europe at all?
I hope later of this year I will really want to go back to Europe. But I was in Venice already in April, so I hope I can have some vacation after. Yeah, because now like the I would say the high the I would say the high season. I mean the most busiest time in Taiwan is late of the year. But I think I wish I could find some time to really go have vacation in Europe. Yeah.
Absolutely, do that. And when you do visit Berlin and say hello. It'd be very
I would
nice
love
to,
to.
yeah, it
Yeah.
would be very nice to meet up and to have a cup of coffee or go for some meal or something. It'd be lovely to do that, to catch up.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. If you ever have chance to come to Taipei, please. I have nothing I want to show you.
I would love to. I would really love to. So yes, let's make a rough plan that we visit each other. That would be great.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah,
that.
definitely. Deal.
Thank you very much. You have a good
Thank
time,
you,
yeah, and we'll stay
Nicole.
in
Yeah,
touch.
yeah. Good. Thank
Okay.
you, Nicole. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.